All right, hello everyone. Welcome to episode 62 of Going Live with Good Soil. I'm joined with Matt here. September 6th already. Wow. Okay, so we should be getting those September CPI metrics in about a week, I think, exactly a week from today. And I was just
August,
looking,
yeah.
yeah, for August. Sorry, August CPI numbers. And I was just looking at the Cleveland Fed. Their prediction for it keeps coming down. It's 0.06. So it started out like 0.2 like a few weeks ago when I first saw it. Then it was 0.1 something. Now 0.06. It's pretty close to zero or negative at this point. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a deflationary print next week. And what's interesting is they just posted their prediction for September CPI, and their prediction for September CPI is 0.42. So that's a pretty high starting point for them
Wow.
to predict
Wow.
September. I think that'll come down. My guess is it'll come down. And just like August, they probably started at 0.3, I think, and then it came down. Now it's close to zero. My guess is September will come down. I don't know. We'll find out in the next few weeks. They update it every few days, I think, or a week or so. But yeah, the CPI print next week is a big deal, I guess, for macro stuff, right, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the rally we saw was driven by kind of expectations that inflation had turned the corner and that Fed wouldn't, raise their rates too aggressively. But we saw in the last couple of weeks that narrative kind of falling apart after the Jackson Hole comments from Powell. So, and I think the markets as of last week were pricing in like a 4% Fed funds rate at the peak. Which is pretty aggressive. So to the extent that we never hit those figures or inflation comes down a bit, then yeah, I think we could certainly have some good news potential and that could lift equities. But
Yeah.
a lot depends on how these next couple CPI prints come in. So yeah, if September
Yeah.
is anywhere near that 0.4% number or 0.4 number, that would be very bad news, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there's all kinds of macro stuff we can go into, but we're going to kind of skip macro for the most part today. There's not a whole lot of new stuff on macro this week. We're still sort of in a holding pattern. I feel like waiting for the Fed to give some new signal on what they're going to do. I guess but for Tesla, there's a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. And for one, I mean, full self driving 10.69.2 or .1, I think you got, right, Matt? You got that yesterday or the day before. Is
Yeah.
that right?
Yep. Yeah. So I got
What's
the
your
the dot
impression?
one version. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting. It seems like a mixed bag to me, to be honest with you. Like my first drive was just amazing. It kind of blew my mind. The
Mm-hmm.
confidence that it has is just like much better. The turning kind of the jerkiness of the wheel is greatly reduced. And so
Mm-hmm. That's
initially
good.
my impressions were just like, oh, this is like a much more kind of human-like drive. And it solved a lot of the problems that I've been having on a regular basis. But I drove it yesterday and I took it out for like an hour this morning too, just to kind of get a little bit more, view of kind of how it works. And um, it, it made a lot of really horrible mistakes, to be honest with you. So I had,
Really? Okay.
like this morning in particular, the left turns seem to
And just
be
to
kind of an
real quick,
issue.
just so everyone knows, this is the beta version. It's supposed to have mistakes in it. So we're just, going over critical feedback of what the mistakes are in this version, and it's going to get better. But Matt's
Yeah.
one of the early beta testers. But go on. Sorry, Matt. Yeah.
And Elon even mentioned that there are some pretty obvious things they need to fix that
Mm-hmm.
won't require a lot of code that will be updated in the dot two. So
Yeah.
all the criticism that I'm gonna about to kind of put out there, definitely take it with a grain of salt, and that's why they do this beta testing.
Yes.
Yeah, but like this morning in particular, I tried a couple left hand turns where it was turning left onto like a moderately busy road, and like basically 3 out of the 4 times it really started to turn right into like oncoming traffic in a way that was definitely not safe. So like I
Mm.
ended up having to slam on the brakes or to slam on the accelerator in order to kind of make a very tight gap. So that was a little bit discouraging because it would go up to the intersection, it would kind of wait, it would show you where it was creeping, and it would go like right to the edge of the lane, or sometimes even into the lane a little bit. So there was really no more room left to creep. And then it let 2 or 3 cars pass, and then like there'd be a 4th car and it would be clear after that, but it would start to go, like and there was like nothing to do. Like I had to really slam on the brakes or slam on the accelerator, like I said, and this happened kind of repeatedly. So that was a
Wow.
little bit discouraging because the smaller things were much more smooth,
So
but
it
at the
goes
same
through
time
that.
there was
is it going through that like blue force field on the screen when it's going at that point? Do you have that
Yeah, I mean,
thing?
so I had my eyes on the road, so I wasn't,
Okay.
tracking exactly, um, how
Mm.
the turns were going. But I before we got up to the point where like there wasn't a whole lot of wiggle room left, yeah, it would have that little like blue area
Yeah.
mark where it was creeping up towards. And
Yeah.
so then like, but once it gets up there, then you're kind of on
You don't
high
want to.
alert, and
Yeah.
you don't want to mess around with it. So
Yeah.
it yeah, just had issues turning left, and one time too. One of the things that was doing when I was actually turning left at like a left turn lane with a light, it like zoomed up to the middle of the road like
Yeah.
really aggressively. Like it almost looked like I was going to hit the other person who was turning left from the other direction, but then it stopped. But because it had pulled so far forward, I actually didn't have good visibility on when it was going to turn left.
Yeah.
So it started to go and it looked like it was clear, and then it was like obvious that there was another car coming. So we'd kind of like creeped into the lane, and then I had to like slam on the accelerator again just to complete the turn because it had
Mm-hmm.
started it in a really suboptimal way. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd never seen this many what I would call like dangerous kind of like safety level mistakes in
Mm-hmm.
any of the previous builds.
Mm-hmm.
So like I don't think it's going to be a huge amount of work for them to fix these issues.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it was like it was a bit more nerve wracking than any of the builds that I'd been on. I mean, the
Yeah.
mistakes that it used to do were just like annoying, like going way too
Yeah.
slow or like just like jerky, and these were making
Yeah.
the worst decision at the worst possible time. So
Yeah.
really hopeful to see the kind of .2 version. But I've
Yeah.
seen other beta testers, and the results seem like they're a bit mixed, but generally an improvement. So
Yeah.
again, I'm just kind of one person with my observations in my little area, so don't extrapolate too far.
And these are the same roads you've been using, same routes you drive. You're not like exploring new roads much, right? You're using the same kind of road routes you normally are using the
Yeah,
beta testing on for the previous versions.
for the most part, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Today I kind of ventured a little bit further afield than usual, but it's still kind of like the same routes. I mean, for the
Mm-hmm.
most part, like the roads were like 45 mile an hour, moderate
Mm-hmm.
traffic, but nothing super complicated.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like no traffic either. So
It's so
um,
hard for me to fathom because here where I have this theory, like, I don't know, like maybe FSD beta is overfit for California suburbs versus Detroit. You're closest to Detroit, right? So Detroit
yeah,
suburbs, you're in a suburb. So maybe the roads in California suburbs are just, there's something different characteristic. I used to live in the tri-state area of New York, and a lot of those suburbs are very similar to the suburbs here in California, though. So I don't know what would be different about Detroit suburbs, to be honest. But it just seems strange that my FSD beta and a lot of people in California, not everyone, I guess, but a couple other like Holmars and others, a couple other in California, especially, seem to be very, much more comfortable, or, not getting as nerve-wracking results. The other
mhm,
theory I have is like the overfitting for California for some, but I can't tell what the difference really is. The other theory I have is like, is it possible that maybe you're kind of a very overly cautious driver anyway, and like, anything that
yeah,
deviates from what you think is cautious is like, I gotta correct this, because I
yeah,
know there's drivers like that, and for me, I have part of that in me. And so in FSD beta, when I was first using it, it would like make a wide turn into my street, and it would be so close to the cars parked on the side of the street. I'd be like, that's unnecessary, but I trusted it, and it did it, and I got more comfortable. But the first couple of times it
yeah,
took over, I'd be like, that's an accident. Whoa, I saved an accident. But as
yeah,
I
yeah.
became more trusting of it, I realized it's just cutting corners closer than I would in a different way, but it's not going to create accidents. But it's just different than what I would do. Do you think that's possible?
I would say earlier on, yeah, that was
Mm-hmm.
definitely kind of something that was at play. Where I would say I am a somewhat conservative driver generally, so
Mm-hmm.
that certainly does factor into it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but like this time, I was I went back and kind of retested some left turns that seemed like they were wrong, just to kind of see like let the system actually do it itself. So I did a tweet thread about this, and one of the issues was that it was doing the Chuck Cook style left when it really wasn't appropriate to do so. Now that wasn't necessarily dangerous, but it was just not the way that I would do it, and I would want to kind of intervene for that. The issues I saw this morning though were more like there was no margin for error, and it was just kind of blatantly unsafe.
Yeah.
So that's not something that I think is just me being conservative. The other thing I would just add on is I had a brief exchange with Jordan from the Limiting Factor about this, and he's in rural Ohio, and those roads are a lot different. And it like he was saying that he has to intervene like very frequently, and it's just like very
But
clearly it doesn't work well for him.
But I could imagine Jordan being even a more cautious driver than you. Like
That
kind of like you not I'm not prejudiced or anything, but as much as you nerd out on numbers and accounting and stuff that to me, I picture that as being like someone that could be super cautious driver. And Jordan is a similar boat. Like he's practically like, and someone like Troy Test, like I would imagine him being like the super most cautious driver potentially out there. So like I mean, there's certain people that are like I just imagine in my head are probably like super cautious drivers anyway, but I don't know. I mean, it's just hard for me to imagine because I have California and I grew up in the tri-state of New York and Connecticut and Long Island, and the suburbs there are very similar to the suburbs roads where I am in California, Northern California, at least. So I can't tell why it's overfitting versus, unless maybe it's just the personalities of some of the FSD beta testers are just don't want it. I don't know. That's my intuition, but I could be completely wrong. I'd love to see your drives like with like a Chuck Cook style drone even or something. That would be the best qualitative way to evaluate someone's FSD beta, flexibility or tolerance is, I guess, with the drone video, but only like Chuck Cook does that. No one else is doing that, I guess. Yeah.
It's taken us like a year to get my sound reasonably okay. So getting to the point of doing drone videos, I think is a little bit outside our technological prowess. But James Dalma did make a really good point this weekend, though, and he said something to the effect of like everybody has a different style of driving. Like you pull up to a stop sign differently than I will. You'll like pull forward a little bit differently than I will as well. And so some of the stuff that we view as like issues that FSD needs to improve upon is really just irrelevant differences in driving behavior, and they probably stick out a lot right now. Because like we have to take over and we're still driving so frequently. But I think when you get to like if you fast forward 3 years from now and like robo-taxis are all over the place and like you're used to driving that way and you're not paying attention to the road, you won't really care if it pulls to the stop sign more slowly than you would. And in fact, you might actually prefer that because it'll be a little bit more comfort, a little bit less kind of G-force. So that part of it, I think we do need to give the car a little bit of leeway just because everybody is going to be different and has their own style.
Yeah.
So
why I think we need to give the car leeway? Yeah. Why I think also, because like you were saying, James Down was saying, like everyone's different style. Like there's 1,000 FSD beta testers that got the first one. Now there's like 10,000, and you're part of the 10,000 rollout. I think they got the next version, right? And then there's like 100,000. I'm part of that, probably. I guess the next rollout next week or whatever. And we haven't heard of any like sensationalist crashes caused by FSD beta even before this version. I mean, maybe there's been like a fender bender someone's allegedly accused it of, but I've never seen any proof of that. I've seen like some rumor of that once in a while or something, but like there's never been any crash. And of the thousands and thousands of people using it, it just seems odd to me that there's not even one crash caused by FSD beta yet. Like I'm not saying it can't cause a crash. I'm not saying it can't. I'm just saying it's maybe much, much less dangerous than we think it is just because the style is so different,
Yeah. Well, so I think AI Addict it was, I could be getting that wrong, but he posted the video of beta crashing. It just like it
but
went
that guy's
into,
like business
like
is like doing that. That's his business.
He's skeptical,
show
like
fallible.
Yeah.
So I would not trust anything that guy says. Yeah, I would.
I would not either, honestly. I was going to kind of agree with. I definitely agree with you that there's a little bit of sensationalism, but with where we are right now, I think the combination of FSD and the drivers overseeing it definitely seems to be way safer than just like pure humans. So
I think so too. Even if the style is different, it seems safer. We'd hear of more anecdotal stories by now than the most extreme, fanatical skeptic of full self-driving out there trying to show a crash of it, which is the AI addict person or whatever. We'd see more than we'd see some regular people showing some evidence of some kind of fender benders more regularly or crashes. I haven't even seen evidence of it once by a regular tester, so there'd be more evidence of anecdotes, at least in my opinion. That's why I think it's probably much safer than we realize. It's just a very different style that is not comfortable to be driving in, to be honest, for a lot of people, Yeah.
Yeah.
And
My wife hates it. It's so
yeah,
funny. She's
my wife
like,
is
won't let me
uncomfortable
turn it
for
on.
sure. Yeah. But my wife was uncomfortable with the highway full self-driving for the first year or two as well. And now she's completely comfortable with it. So there was
Yeah, same.
uncomfortable turns on the highway, like going up and down through the curves. It would stay like 70 miles an hour, even though normal people would slow it down to 55 miles an hour. You'd be like, and it'd be too close to the cars. But I would trust it, and I got my tolerance built up over time. But the first, year or two, there was a lot of instances where I was like really nerve wracking, and I would take
Yeah.
over, So,
Yeah.
and then it got better at the same time as my tolerance improved to different styles. So it just sort of merged into being like, all right, now I'm completely comfortable with it. I feel like the same thing is
Yeah.
going to be happening with FSD beta here.
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing to keep in mind is like this was such a massive rewrite on this 10.69 version. Like they
Yeah.
basically like started from scratch essentially and rewrote a lot of the logic behind all of the driving that it's been doing. So
Yeah.
it's maybe not surprising that there's a few issues in these earliest couple of releases. But what I'm
Yeah.
super excited for is they don't have to like, go and again rewrite the whole code to get to the next iteration. So my expectation is that kind of the pace of updates from here and the pace of improvement from here will be a lot quicker than it has been over the last 6 months. And so that's if that's true, then that's gonna I'm very excited to see how that unfolds.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to see hear how your experience is when you get it, because
I can't wait to try it. Yeah. I can't wait
like
to try.
in
I'm so
95
excited. Yeah, I'm so excited. I love the FSD beta I have already here where I am, and I'm so used to it on the roads. I know like the 3 intersections, I usually have to intervene a little bit because it doesn't read the turn lanes right or whatever. So I know those few spots, but for everything else, I'm like 99% comfortable with exactly what it's doing all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, and what I was going to say is like in like 95% of the driving, like this version was like a very significant step forward. It feels so much more smooth, way less kind of
Good.
lateral jerk. It was, making turns a lot more comfortably, a lot more confidently.
Mm-hmm.
And I had one very like small instance of phantom braking, but really
Mm-hmm.
it was just pretty much an improvement in every way except for these left turns, which it was kind of botching at the worst time.
Yeah. I see Yashu in the comments. How you doing, Yashu? He said he'd love for Tesla to release data points on FSD. I hope so too. I think the sooner Tesla can release actual data points, the better. I mean, there's so many skeptics out there.
Yeah.
The miles driven crashes. I think that they got to release more data sooner or later before the skeptics really cause too. You saw the Dowd guy put that video together, all this crazy stuff. So we need data out there by Tesla sooner or later, so NHTSA isn't coerced into creating some kind of like regulation against FSD driving or something. I don't know. I feel like there's a danger there. So the more data Tesla can show on the safety of it, I think the better over time.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And that was when we had that roundtable with Naveen Rao and Gary Marcus. They were basically saying the same thing, that, I was
Yeah.
kind of trying to come up with some data points, just like, using napkin math. And they're like, no, that's not applicable. You need the actual statistics. And so
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
there's a fair point. And if the data really is in Tesla's corner, then I think it's only a matter of time before they release it in some form or fashion just to kind of bolster their case.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's go into the I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on the virtual power plant. I mean, that's one of your biggest specialties. I think people go to you. I see on Twitter all the time, people are like, what does Matt think of this? People I think go to you for your knowledge around that space, around the utilities and the inefficient. It's just such a complicated, convoluted industry in so many ways. And I think you have
That's
the
true.
best beat on it. Most people agree that you have the best beat on it within the Tesla community, it seems. And I mean, the virtual power plant, the guy, Brian, from Next Big Future, we're on like some Twitter DM with him. He keeps bringing up like the virtual power plant instances in California, and he's excited, and a lot of other people are excited, and you're kind of tempering people's expectations, I think, rightly so. I mean, what are your thoughts about how profitable can it be ever, or in the near term? I mean, it's definitely doing a social good, obviously, but the current status, as my understanding, is like no profit for Tesla, basically. But in the near term, they could mildly get some profit from it, but it's not going to move the needle. I mean, what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you did a good kind of high level summary. Maybe just
Mhm.
for those who aren't aware of the issues going on in California, it's been an absolute heat wave there. I don't know if is it in San Francisco where you are in the Bay Area, or is
Yeah,
that more
it's
Southern
freaking.
California?
I just got back from. It's funny. I was just on away with my youngest son. We took a overnight Amtrak train to Colorado and then stayed one night and then overnight back. And it was still hot over there. But when we came back last night, it was like 110 or 112 degrees here in the north where I am in the North Bay. I was like,
Jeez.
wow, I've never seen it this hot. Good thing I have air conditioning in my house because I know a lot of people around here don't have air conditioning. And the beaches and the coastlines are all like
Yeah.
flooded. There's like messages from from the sheriff county, people saying don't go to the beaches. It takes hours to get there. It's overcrowded, because everyone's flocking to the coast to try to get cooler air. So it's record breaking heat here.
Yeah, and so that creates a lot of strain on the grid when everybody and all the businesses are turning on their air conditioning, which is like the single biggest use of electricity, the demand during these peak days. So you're at this point where there's close to as much demand on the grid as there is available supply. And so what Tesla has participated in a program that's being run by PG&E, the local utility there in California. And just a quick side note, like a lot of people kind of give Tesla credit for this, but really this is a PG&E pilot program, which Tesla and several other kind of VPP hardware suppliers are participating in. So PG&E set the rates, they got them approved by the utility, and Tesla just kind of like locked in and said, "Yeah, we'll participate."
Is Tesla the
Tesla,
lion's share of that, or are the
I
other
believe they
participants?
are. Yeah,
Okay, so it's
yeah. So it's
mostly
like
Tesla and a couple other rounding error people trying to participate. Okay, go
Yeah,
on. Sorry.
yeah, I think so. But so PG&E is paying $3 per kilowatt hour for every bit of electricity for every kilowatt hour that's provided during these kind of stated grid emergencies.
Is that
And there's all
historically
sorts.
expensive? It sounds probably historically expensive, but in reference price, what would it normally be? Yeah.
It's ridiculous. So yeah, like I mean, maybe like an average-ish, maybe towards the high end of like a normal kilowatt hour provided by the utility would be like around 20 cents per kilowatt hour, something like that.
Whoa. So
So
three
they're paying
dollars.
$3. Yeah.
Oh my
Which like
gosh.
if you're discharging 10 kilowatt hours, then you're in one grid event, then it's $30. And if you have got two power walls, it can be 60. So you can see how very quickly over the course of like a week or 2 weeks where there's many of these events, you can be generating like $100 or potentially even more. And so it's great for the homeowners, and it's also, or the asset owners, and it's also great for the grid because like PG&E doesn't want to pay you $3. I can promise you that, but they're willing to
Yeah.
do so to balance the grid and to like prevent brownouts, which is what would happen if there's not enough supply. So it's it's a very impactful thing, but I think people lose sight of the fact that like $3 is very high. That's only going to work when there's not kind of widespread battery penetration, or like that, or if there are like very serious grid issues, which California has, to be clear. But I could, like, most of the rest of the country doesn't have rolling blackouts and stuff like California has had with all the wildfires and stuff in recent years. So, point of caution is one, those economics are probably not scalable nationwide or worldwide.
Okay.
And two, Tesla does not get a share right now of that. So Tesla is kind of coordinating this. They give like the dispatch signals to the power walls, but they are not actually, getting a cut. So when I was running the math on kind of like what a scalable revenue model might look like for this sort of thing in the future, I was envisioning like a house that had solar panels, two power walls, and an EV, which you can actually use an EV that's charging as a way of getting a capacity payment. So I won't go down the rabbit hole of that, but the math I was coming up with was that a scalable kind of revenue model for that bundle of assets, it would be generating around $400 of margin per year, which would have to be split between the homeowner and Tesla somehow. So I think that's like, maybe I've seen some people kind of saying like, oh, if there's 60 events a year or something like that, then you can do like, $6,000 a year or something like that. And like, you get a 2-year payback on your assets. And I just, I don't think the opportunity is quite that good. But that doesn't mean there's no opportunity. I just think it's gonna take a long time to scale out, because like you've got to do a separate program for PG&E in California. They're doing something different in Texas. They've got a very small pilot program in New Hampshire. They're doing something in the UK, and like you've got to work with all these regulators and all these states and work with utilities.
Messy.
And it's messy, and it's time
So much red tape and bureaucracies. I can only imagine. Yeah.
And like you've got to go to the hearings. You can't just like do the Tesla lean thing and be like, all right, we're going to like introduce this product in California and introduce this product. Like you've got to actually go and like meet with commissioners and like attend meetings and hearings. And so like it's from an overhead perspective, like there's, if they really want to scale this up, they're going to need a lot of like overhead of people who understand the relationships with all these different entities and are willing to put in the time to do that. So I just think it's probably going to be slower than people think, and it's going to be not as margin positive as people think in the short term.
Yeah. Like it's going to do a good social good for the most extreme areas. But in terms of Tesla's valuation, it's not going to move the needle anytime soon. It's probably, that's my takeaway. It's probably going to be a long time before people factor that into like a $1 trillion market cap company, a company that's already a $1 trillion market cap company. If it was a startup of like a couple $1 billion market cap, we'd be like, oh, this is a great startup company, let's buy it, but buy that stock. But Tesla's a $1 trillion market cap company. You got to have something that's going to move the needle, hundreds of billions of dollars market cap valuation to really move the needle at this point. And it's great. Tesla should do it. In the future, it's going to become more and more important. And maybe after at the end of the decade or something, maybe it'll be more of a needle mover. But in the next few years, it doesn't seem like it's going to really change the stock price itself, right?
Yeah, I don't think so. And a lot of people have been commenting on like the margin potential of mega packs with the Lathrop facility really ramping now. And I just think some of those estimates that we've seen of like 40% plus gross margins are really exaggerated too. So like once they scale that and they kind of, if they're able to achieve some of the scales like they did in the automotive side, like that really surprised me, honestly. So maybe they can go from roughly 0, which is where they are right now in energy, to, plus 10 or 15 or maybe even 20%. And on a huge, like energy revenues have not been growing. They've been very kind of stagnant. There's been many quarters where they've actually decreased, quarter over quarter. But I think we really are at a turning point where the revenues are going to ramp really aggressively. And so maybe you start getting 10% or so margins on the hardware sales, and that will be much more meaningful than what you'd see from like the virtual power plant.
Yeah. And just, this is not a good comparison. This is like apples to orange comparison I'm going to make right now. But in terms of like social utility, in terms of backup power, I think of Generac as like the leading player in that space, and their market cap is $14 billion, and they're very successful the last few years. I mean, I think the power walls could be much more, helpful and efficient, just like EVs are much more efficient than ICEs. But, I mean, I guess I don't know the financials of Generac, to be honest, but I'm just saying it's not like a hundreds of billions of dollar market cap company that Tesla could displace, with this technology pretty quickly. If they displace Generac quickly, well, you're displacing a 14 billion market cap company. It's not a multi-$100 billion market cap company you're displacing to add, 20% to the stock price or something, Yeah,
and Generac is actually like a surprisingly forward-looking company. I mean, you think of like, most people probably think of Generac and you think of like these old like natural gas generators that are, antiquated technology. And to some extent that's true, but management of Generac has been very aggressive on adopting batteries and really doing virtual power plants, like, and aggregating these assets. They realized that they were in a unique position with all these like standby generators to say, hey, we can provide backup power to the grid. And so they've been probably even more aggressive than Tesla in terms of pursuing, these VPP opportunities. So, they're, and I think they've gotten a lot of valuation credit, like you pointed out, in their stock in the last couple of years, because they really are on the cutting edge of this new economic model.
Yeah. And yet its valuation is only 15
it's only 14
billion. Less than half of Rivian's valuation, like, or something.
Energy is important for sure, but I think it's more on the social side. Like I did a discounted cash flow a couple of years ago, and I was coming up with like around $200, $250. This was pre-split. So, call it, $75, $80, something like that in today's share price. So like clearly like that's worth more than Wall Street's, allocating to it. But it pales in the comparison of FSD or Robotaxis.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's go to the Q&A. We're going to do kind of a lightning round. I have to have a kind of a hard stop in about 12 or 13 minutes. So we'll go to Q&A if that's all right, Matt. Maybe Alec, you want to post some questions?
I ranted too much already. So
all right. Yeah, no problem. So this is a question. I've had I posted an old interview with me and Dave Lee from 2014, and a few people commented and sent me DMs asking me stuff like this. So T. Demoli on Twitter said, do you still have the same level of conviction for Tesla's future given how far they've come? So since 2014, there's interview shows, it's between me and Dave, some other guys were talking about Tesla in similar ways. And yeah, I mean, back then Tesla's market cap was, I think it had just gone to like 30 billion from like 3 billion or something. And we were, we had conviction it could get to like 100 or 200 billion market cap, within a few years, and now we're at $1 trillion market cap. Like we never envisioned it going this high, this quickly. But I still, with all the new, stuff coming from Tesla and all this execution they've done and, the future unfolding as it is, I still am very heavily convicted. I'm not as convicted in Tesla multiplying by, 3x or 5x anytime in the next year or 2 years, like I thought back then it could do any year going forward. But I think the stock is very much safer now in terms of, FUD and shorts trying to take hold of it and stuff. So it's a different risk reward now, but I think it's still a very good risk reward. So that's why I'm not personally as heavy in options necessarily as I was back then, for example. But I'm still very convicted in Tesla as I was back then. I just, for it to be a 10x from here, it's going to take longer than for it to be a 10x from back then, obviously. So, but I still think there's a certain, almost a path of certainty to that eventually. All right, next question. Let's see here. From Lipovitsky William on Twitter, why is having solar and batteries at home so important to Tesla compared to big farms in each city? Big solar farms, I'm assuming. Matt, do you want to? I think I know, but Matt, probably probably much more detailed on this.
Yeah. So the basic reason is that the majority of your actual cost as a like residential utility customer is not on the generation of the electricity itself. It's actually in the transportation of that electricity. So like I was saying earlier, the cost of solar might be actually the cost of solar might be like wow. I usually look at it in megawatt hours, so I'm going to do that like $20 to $30 a megawatt hour. So in some cases, even lower. But then when you add in transmission and distribution, actually taking a step back, utilities will charge you about $60 a megawatt hour instead of like utility average rate is about twice as expensive as solar. And then on top of that, they're going to charge you about 3 to 4 times that 60 cent or that $60 amount for the transmission and distribution. So it's actually more expensive to have rooftop solar than it is to do like a big field, but you actually make up that difference by avoiding the transmission and distribution costs. Now, adding a battery will impact those economics a little bit, but really the kind of first principles thinking here is that having the electricity generation at the exact location of its consumption is just the best way to do it, because you avoid all the other kind of unnecessary costs of transporting the electrons.
Good answer. All right, next question from Samir on YouTube Live. Why will Tesla upgrade FSD hardware for hardware 3 to hardware 4 if hardware 3 is sufficient for full self-driving? I mean, I think you can always improve things, just like the Apple iPhones get better cameras. Even though the existing cameras are sufficient for great photos, you're always going to want to improve. That's my thought. Anything you want to add, Matt?
Yeah, I agree. And I would say I'm also maybe a little bit more skeptical than some bulls that hardware 3 really will get to like robotaxis. Like I absolutely believe hardware 3 will achieve what Tesla promised, within full self-driving, which is like automatic driving on city streets. But that doesn't mean that you will be able to, use it as a robotaxi in the current form. Chuck Cook, who I think is very level-headed, he still really believes that they need to bring, the B pillar camera forward quite a bit. That's even after the improvements that he's seen on his, Chuck Cook left. So I'm on the fence. Like, I think it's possible that hardware 3 could be capable of robotaxis, but to me, it remains to be clear. And just adding more pixels, like you said, is giving more data to make the overall product safer. Iteration. Tesla's never going to stop iterating. Like, hardware 4 is not going to be the end either. I can promise you that.
Yeah. Next question from Farzad. How you doing, Farzad? Thoughts on Robotaxi being run like an airline model? Tesla is the manufacturer of the shell. Fleet runners offer unique interiors and features. Tesla is like Airbus or Boeing. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very, very possible scenario to play out for Tesla. Instead of them themselves trying to like be the actual servicers of the customers, they just provide the shell to the fleet owners who are like the airlines running the fleets. I think that's very possible. I mean, we talked to who's the guy in Europe, Florian from Mr. Green. Yeah. So they do something. I think they're aiming to do something like that in Europe already. They're sort of, but right now it's not Robotaxi, it's just EV fleets they rent out. But I think Hertz, it might be a major player, for example. Or you have any thoughts, Matt? Do you think that's a likely business model or not?
The only thing I would say might be a little bit different than that model is I really do think Tesla will take a cut of each mile going forward. So I think it's going to make the most sense for Tesla to be for there to be a Tesla app where like you ride hail on that just like you would with an Uber or a Lyft or something like that, rather than the Mr. Green app and then like whoever Robotaxi operator number 2 have their own separate app. I just don't see it being that kind of decentralized. And if that's the case, then Tesla is going to get a cut from the upfront sale, just like the airplane or the airlines, the Boeings and the Airbuses of the world. But then they'll also get, like, to keep the analogy going, a cut of every ticket sale thereafter. So I think that's probably how it will go.
Yeah, I think they could even sell their robotaxis to come with a Tesla bot, or something to help with like last foot delivery functions and stuff, or maybe people will buy them paired together because the robotaxi could deliver 1 or 2 bots for a random manual task labor that humans don't want to do for a certain job outside in the heat or whatever it is, in the rain, or just some laborious job that, the bots can do infinitely, so much cheaper than hiring a human to go pick up the trash outside in the road or whatever. I don't know. I feel like there's going to be some interesting combinations even between, the robotaxi and the Tesla bot.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah. All right. From My Tesla Weekend. How you doing, Brian? How soon do you think we'll see analysts taking storage seriously? Matt, I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, I think we're getting pretty close. I mean, if Lathrop really is ramping, and we're getting an extra 40 megawatt or gigawatt hours. I think it's 40 gigawatt hours of storage. Like, they're going to have to start increasing that in their model. I think they're going to wait until we actually see positive gross margins in a meaningful way, though. Because even if, like, you could imagine if energy revenues like increase 10x, but margins are still like 2%, then it doesn't really matter. So like they need to both see revenue ramp and see gross margin increase, which I think both of those things will happen probably in the next 12 months or so. And Brian does say it's 40 gigawatt hours. So
yeah. All right, let's do one more question. Just we have to end a little early today. We'll do one more from Martin Muldoon. How you doing, Martin? Question: any thoughts that SLS Artemis struggles on the, I guess that's the United Launch Alliance vehicle, the rocket? As much as we want it to succeed, it only highlights the success stories like SpaceX and Rocket Lab even more. I agree. Yeah, I mean, this Artemis is a clear, example of why private industry, public companies that are doing it, privately, SpaceX and Rocket Lab are the future of the space industry, in my view. And I think, Matt, you agree. Matt, you've been following some of the struggles probably closer than I have, and the costs around it and such. I mean, what do you think about it?
Yeah, we touched on this a bit last week, and it's like it just even if they succeed, like so from where they initially promised to where they are today, it's like so drastically delayed and so much drastically over budget that like if you could just go back in time, you would have opted to do it. So like that's point one.
Yeah.
Point two is even if they succeed like in the most optimistic way from here, and like the mission goes off without a hitch, it's still inherently like cost prohibitive. I think I saw a note that while this is an incredibly capable vehicle, and like we shouldn't discount the fact that it's like it is like an incredible it's on the pad and Starship is not, and so it's more capable right now than anything else out there. So that's real, but the cost is projected to be $1 to $2 billion per incremental launch. So like how much value can you get out of that?
Yeah.
Like just do like
Yeah.
100 Falcon 9 launches. It's like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
So I
That's
don't know.
like the whole Rocket Lab business is $2.5 billion dollars. That's the market cap of the business of Rocket Lab, and so one launch is like almost the cost of the entire Rocket Lab business. It's crazy. One incremental
Yeah.
launch from here. Yeah. When I
Yeah.
think of it that
So
way.
it's like when you look at what all the alternatives are, and like NASA has some like priorities for getting stuff to the moon. I just think like SLS is where it is because it has like taken so long, and frankly Starship couldn't be given credit 5 years ago. But I think we're in a
Yeah.
spot now where Starship is very close to being able to kind of eat Artemis's lunch and just say like, hey, I know you got a contract with SLS, but like, do you really want to pay $2 billion when we can do it for you for like 50 million? like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just going to be such a clear cut answer. So
Yeah. I can't imagine, SLS like recovering an engine to retest it and use it again. Like, I guess Rocket Lab just did that with the Rutherford engines recently, right? So
yeah.
I can't imagine. And it seems like it was successful, right? I mean, it's Peter Beck commented about it or something. They're learning
Yeah,
a lot from it, probably.
so Rocket Lab did recover one of their used Rutherford engines, refired it, and it worked well. So, the Rutherford was never designed to be reused, but they're finding that it's actually just more capable than they realized. So, yeah,
Mhm.
Artemis, like there's no plans to make it reusable, and they don't have the kind of leadership that would say, "Hey, let's like, just figure out how to iterate to, save these boosters and get a helicopter to catch like these solid fuel boosters." Like it's not going to happen. So, I think you've got to run, Emmett.
Yeah.
So we'll
Not
end
gonna
this a little
happen.
bit early,
All
but
right, guys. Yeah, I got to run. We'll be back next week after the CPI print. It'll be an exciting Tuesday, next Tuesday on the 13th. I think the CPI. So the market will be very jittery then. We'll see, and we'll talk then. All right, guys. Good
looking forward to
chatting.
it.